Welcome to the CHCH Newsmakers podcast. I'm your host, Rick Zamperin. When it comes to federal politics in Canada, there's been a lot of talk this year about elections, tariffs. The election of Prime Minister Mark Carney was a big highlight, the ongoing trade war with the United States, and of course, elbows up. 2025 also marked a first for our guest today. John Paul Danko won a seat for the Liberal Party in this past spring's election in the riding of Hamilton, West-Ancaster-Dundas, and he joins us on Newsmakers. Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well, Rick. Good to see you.
How are your holidays?
They've been fantastic. It's been very nice to be at home for a little bit.
Were holidays this year much different than past years as a city councillor?
Not so much. I mean, it's the same, stress of the holiday season, but I've definitely cherished my time at home a little bit more than I have in the past.
How often are you away?
Well, while the house is sitting, I'm away, during the week, and I try to come home Thursday night, Friday morning, and then back to Ottawa Sunday afternoon. So it's very confusing for the dog. My kids are teenagers, so I don't see that much, but it is a lot of time away.
Yeah. What's that adjustment been like?
I mean, for the family, I'm lucky. My kids are older, right? They're 17 and 19, so they have their own lives, their own thing that they do. There's a time where I was home and my daughter came in the living room and she's like, "Oh, are you back?" She doesn't even know I'm gone. It is hard being away from your family that often, that back and forth. To be honest, I have it easy. I'm just in Hamilton. Ottawa is only 5 hours or a short flight. Some of my colleagues that are across the country have a much harder time with that travel back and forth.
Is that I don't know if it's a major, is that a talking point within the House of Commons in terms of just, off the cuff saying, we miss our families, or, this is a grind? Is that kind of talk go on?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Again, I'm a little bit further on in my life where my kids are older, but we have a number of really younger MPs with young children. So it is a fairly big sacrifice, no matter who you are, which party. It is time away from home. And as you move up, if you're a parliamentary secretary or if you're, a minister or the prime minister, the prime minister has spoken recently about how all-consuming the job is. So the higher you move up within the government, it is a 24/7. You never know what's coming around the corner, and you always have to be prepared.
What's been the biggest eye-opener for you in your first kind of year in Parliament?
I'd say just kind of how large the scope of the federal government is. I've been in an elected position for almost 7 years now, and going from the city Hamilton, which is one of the largest municipalities in Canada, I think we're 10th largest, so a fairly sizable city, going to the federal government is just a fairly significant increase in scale. The duties of the job, as being that public elected official are fairly similar. The highlight for me has really been getting to know my colleagues from across Canada. So we have just the most amazing group of MPs that have been elected that have all various backgrounds from across the country, getting to know them and having the opportunity to work with these people that I really respect as people and individuals, and seeing what they bring to Canada, to the team, has just been an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, I can believe so. Is there a common denominator among members of Parliament? Do you all have something in your genes, in your DNA, that makes you want to be an MP in the first place?
That's a great question. I know from a Liberal perspective, we're a big tent party, so we have a vast diversity of opinions, a diversity of experiences from across the country. So I'm not sure what it is that makes people want to run for office in the first place. But for me, it is that overarching desire just to make your community a better place, and that's what I see across the members in our party anyway. Is that they're really there to deliver for their communities, to work for the constituents. And in the times that we are in right now, Canada as a country and the geopolitical realities that we're facing with the Trump administration in the United States, with conflicts around the world, and just the realigning realities of the modern world, I see the people in our party anyway, there for the right reasons, trying to make Canada a better place for the future.
Yeah, we'll get to some of those big topics as well here on the Newsmakers podcast. I do want to ask you, though, as a city councillor in Hamilton, you were in charge of a ward, right? right? You were elected in a specific ward. And as a member of parliament, you also represent a riding, which is a little bit bigger than what the ward was. From a big kind of scope, looking at your responsibilities, does it feel like it's a bigger job?
The scale of the job is different for sure. Okay. I mean, just in the numbers that we're dealing with, right? You know, at City Hamilton, we're dealing with millions. Now I'm dealing with billions. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, the scale of the responsibility. I feel that. And the trust that the residents have put in me, right? You know, as their elected representative to deliver for Hamilton, to, you know, advocate for their needs at the federal level. You know, I take that that responsibility very seriously. Yeah. But in terms of like the day-to-day of the job, you know, this is a job, and something that I learned in my history of working in construction is building a rapport with people, earning their respect, and having a collaborative relationship with the people that you work with. And that job is, you know, that carried through the City Hamilton. And you know, people see the public-facing persona of elected officials. Mm-hmm. That's not the job. The job is actually working with the bureaucracy, with the staff, the people who actually deliver on the programs. Yeah. And that's the same, whether it's the federal level, municipal, provincial. It's those personal relationships and being able to have a constructive, collaborative way of working with people to deliver for your community.
I've heard a lot of politicians say the real work is in the constituency, meeting mm-hmm. with stakeholders, meeting with residents, meeting with people who live in your riding, mm-hmm. and seeing how they want this country, or what direction they want this country to go to. Is there some accuracy to that?
Oh, absolutely. And that's my job, first and foremost, mm-hmm. is to represent the residents of Hamilton, West-Ancaster-Dundas. And as I said, I take that responsibility very seriously. I feel that every day when I'm there in Ottawa. You know, I can see just the top of the Peace Tower out of my apartment window. And, you know, when I wake up in the morning, I feel that responsibility. And then, you know, going back to where we are in the world right now, and I heard that during the election campaign, the fact that we're in a trade war with the United States, the how we are treated by the Trump administration and their designs and goals, not just for Canada, but for the rest of the world. You know, there's a real responsibility for the constituents of Hamilton, West-Ancaster-Dundas mm-hmm. to make sure that their voices are represented. And also when we have, you know, a budget that is redefining the Canadian economy for the next 100 years, that those investments come back to Hamilton. Yeah. And I'm very fortunate of, you know, taking over for Philomena Tassi, the former MP in Hamilton West, Ancaster-Dundas, and, you know, seeing what she was able to deliver for Hamilton and trying to continue on with that to make sure that, you know, when we are investing federal money, that we're leveraging that money for Hamilton.
What are you hearing from constituents? What direction do they want to see this country go in?
Well, right now, the big issue is affordability, the cost of living, the cost of housing, just the overall difficulties that people have in their day-to-day lives making ends meet. I mean, that is the overarching concern for people right now. And that goes to, again, with the budget that we just passed in November, of redefining Canada's economy for the next century to make sure that the generations to follow have those opportunities in Canada, in Hamilton, to have a job, to be able to raise their own families, to stay in this community. And I think Hamilton is really uniquely positioned in Canada as a community with tremendous potential for growth. I mean, in my riding, I have McMaster, Mohawk, and Redeemer post-secondary institutions. Mm-hmm. That access to talent, that research, development in new technologies and new ways of optimizing business and that kind of thing, along with the infrastructure that we have in Hamilton. And Hamilton, of course, being Canada's industrial center for the past century. And I think having a tremendous opportunity to leverage that experience that we have here, that industry that we have here in manufacturing industry, for the kinds of things that we'll need in the next century. So I'm really excited about that.
On the industry standpoint, there's been a critical blow dealt to steelmakers because of what's happening with the tariff situation. Are you bullish on that side of the equation in terms of the industrial sector in Hamilton?
So when Donald Trump says we want Canada to be the 51st state, he's dead serious. He means that. And their way of achieving that is to basically crush Canada's economy, to destroy Canada's economic independence, and to create us into basically a colonial state of the United States. That is the American goal for Canada. So, in that context, our role as a federal government is to reset the entire Canadian economy, to reduce our reliance on the United States as they're no longer a reliable, stable trade partner. So, we're doing that. That takes time. And Hamilton, unfortunately, is one of the most impacted municipalities in the entire country when it comes to tariffs, when it comes to trade disputes with the U.S. So it does take time to realign, those economic structures that have been in place for decades. But I'm very optimistic that Hamilton has the core industrial capacity and the experience and the people, the workers, the labor, and all the things that makes Hamilton such a great city, to live and work. It sets us up for reinvestment in the next economy of the 21st century. So I think, it takes time, and the transition is difficult, but I'm very optimistic for the future.
This question is going to be almost impossible to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyways because people have heard you say it's going to take time. Do we have a guesstimate on how long it's going to take? Is this a 5-year plan, a 20-year plan, a 50-year plan? How do we become more independent?
Well, I mean, a lot of it depends on the United States, right? You've heard the Prime Minister say, we're not going to accept a bad deal. And that's the frustration. I mean, everybody wants to have a solution to this disagreement with the United States. My personal opinion, I don't think that there will be a resolution until the economy holds the Trump administration accountable. And we saw that initially, right? When the first tariffs came in, the economy, the economic outlook dropped, the stock markets dropped, and there was some accountability for the Trump administration. But since then, the U.S. economy, at least on paper, has been doing very well. So there's been no accountability for these disastrous decisions that are being made by, a hostile U.S. administration. Right. So, that's coming. And I think it's not just Canada that is divesting from investment in the United States and American markets. The entire world is doing the same thing. So in a lot of ways, it's really unfortunate for our American friends and neighbors because eventually they will be isolated in the world and there will be some economic circumstances to deal with because of that.
Your impression of Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who's maybe been the most vocal in more ways than one opponent of President Trump, just thoughts on how the Premier is handling this? Well, I know it's a different level of government, but...
No, I think across Canada, and again, we just signed a memorandum of understanding with Alberta about, oil development in Alberta. And some of those actions that we're taking as a federal government is about Canadian unity because as a country, we need to be united. We need to be strong. We need to be seen as united and strong. Yeah. Working with the premiers is critical. So when you see that, the Prime Minister sitting down with Premier Ford and premiers from across Canada, Indigenous leaders, municipal leaders, mayors, that's about Canadian unity in the face of hostility from our neighbors to the south. And when you're dealing with somebody like a Donald Trump that, preys on weakness, that is one of the biggest strengths that we have as Canada, as Canadians, is that unity, working together towards a common goal. And the fact is, Ontario is Canada's economic center, and Hamilton being a critical component of that.
Prime Minister Mark Carney, your boss, has handled it in a much different way, much more diplomatic way. Your thoughts on how the PM has handled Mr. Trump?
Well, people often ask me, what is Prime Minister Carney like? Like, what, on a day-to-day basis? And, I see him regularly in the House of Commons and in our meetings. And he is exactly like what you think he's like. He is, I would say uniquely qualified in to face this challenge that we're in right now. He's all business in our meetings. He brings it up to just such a high level. He knows every file. He knows where we need to go as a country. He has a plan to get us there, and he has very high expectations of each and every one of us to deliver on our responsibilities in our local communities. And coming from private sector, I really appreciate that level of accountability. There's no question that he's in a very difficult position dealing with, primarily with the U.S. administration, but also, there's ongoing challenges around the world that come up and have to be addressed. And I'm again, really optimistic about Canada being a world leader. And I think this is a real opportunity for us where in the past, the best and brightest went to the United States, whether it's for economic or education or whatever. I think we have a real opportunity now to be that leader, in the G7. And you've heard the Prime Minister say that over and over again. Our goal is to have the strongest economy in the G7. But he means that, and that's our focus, and that's our goal.
What's a typical caucus meeting like?
I said earlier, the highlight of this job has been getting to meet people from across Canada. So, it's very open. People share their opinions. Being, a big tent centrist party, we have a wide variety of opinions, whether it's on F-35s versus Gripens or whether it's, conflict in the Middle East or, whatever the issue of the day is. These really important issues facing Canada. There's a wide variety of opinions in the Liberal Party on those issues. And, we talk it out. We know what the PM's position is, and sometimes it doesn't always agree with caucus, but it's always a respectful discussion.
Right. And is it important. Like an open forum? Is there an agenda? Like, how does that work?
Oh no, there's always an agenda. Okay. This is this government. You start with the agenda.
Let's go to the budget because, as you mentioned, the words transformational were used. Obviously, it's going to take some time for a lot of these projects to get going. Is there something that sticks out to you in terms of this could be a game changer if we see it through to the end?
Well, the big one for me is the $51 billion for the Build Canada Strong Fund. So a lot of that is infrastructure spending, infrastructure investment. And I think that's somewhere where Hamilton has a really good opportunity to benefit from a significant amount of those investments. Hamilton is a very old city. We have old infrastructure, as you know. Being coming from city council, I'm intimately familiar with some of the challenges that Hamilton faces with infrastructure. So I think there's a real opportunity for us to leverage some of that spending, and also just where we're situated, in the Golden Horseshoe between Toronto and the border with the U.S., with the port, the airport. There's a lot of that trade diversification infrastructure that Hamilton, I think, is positioned to take advantage of, that along with housing. Hamilton, in many ways, and I speak with the mayor on a regular basis and my former colleagues on council, but Hamilton has done a really good job to date on the housing file. Like when you see what's going on across the country, we're actually one of the leaders in Canada, and we've been ahead of the curve on developing affordable housing, supportive housing. So some of those housing investments in the Build Canada Homes Fund as well, I think are really well positioned to benefit Hamilton. So I'm excited about that.
We need other parts of the equation to help us out in that regard, because we can have a plan as the budget lays out, and the provincial government has tried to spur more home building and hasn't really stacked up in terms of the output or the numbers, because we need home builders, we need landowners to say, okay, let's do this. The return on the investment has to be there for these home builders as well. How do we get there? Because there seems to be at some point a disconnect.
It's a difficult market now. And the development industry, home builders, people that work in the construction industry, they're our partners. And we need to, put in the right supports to get them working, to build more homes, to give people the opportunity. Whether you're a young family, you're looking to get into the housing market, you need an affordable place to be able to move. Or if you're a senior, you're looking to downsize, you want to stay in your community, you need, the appropriate type of housing that's in Hamilton that you can actually afford, that then opens up spaces for other people, like within the housing market. So, right now the housing market is suffering some real challenges. Nobody's building. Projects that had started are stalled. And we see the role of the federal government is to leverage some of that federal investment in order to bring in further private development investment, working with our partners in the construction industry, working with our partners in the skilled trades, making sure that we have workers in the skilled trades that have the opportunity to continue to work, to contribute, and that have the training and the experience that they need to work in that industry. So there's no question. I think we're going to see a shift in the market. Interest rates have stabilized. Inflation has stabilized. Our Canadian economic fundamentals are strong. What is one of the biggest challenges beyond the housing market is just the overall uncertainty. Yeah. And I think as we see that stabilize, we'll see a return to more normalcy in the housing market. And the federal government is there to step up and make sure that we get the types of housing that we need built.
The tariffs have been a big part of the uncertainty because they were kind of on, they were off, they were up, they were down. They were threats of being doubled or tripled or whatever the case is from President Trump. In 2026, are you hopeful that those tariffs are going to evaporate, or is this going to be something you anticipate is going to live on through this Trump administration until they have another election down south?
Well, I can't predict what Donald Trump's going to do, or
are you optimistic though?
Or what mood he's going to be in the right. When he wakes up in the morning, who knows?
I don't think he knows.
But we can control what we can control, and again, our role as the federal government is to diversify the Canadian economy so that our reliance on, whatever Donald Trump's mood is in the morning no longer has ripple effects through the Canadian economy. Tariffs are a huge negative economic impact. I think they're taking about $500 billion out of the Canadian economy through those tariffs. We're going into CUSMA negotiations, which would be even that much more serious. But the investments that we're making in the budget in Canada, really believing in Canadian industry, Canadian business, Canadian ingenuity, we're projecting that that $500 million or $500 billion that the U.S. is taking out through tariffs will be adding in more than double that, up to $1 trillion in new investment in Canada, leveraging that public sector investment and bringing in private sector investment. And we're already seeing that. I happen to sit on the Natural Resources Committee. We just did a study on critical minerals and the forestry industry. So we're seeing that investment already being realized in the potential that we have as a country. We have tremendous natural resources. We have some of the most amazing skilled workforce in the world, the best researchers, the best, technology advantages over other places, combined with our access to these critical minerals and resources that the rest of the world depends on. Yeah. So you've heard the Prime Minister say, right, the world wants more Canada, and we have to be in a position where we're ready to provide it.
One of those resources is oil, bitumen from the Alberta oil sands. Is there a consensus to get more of that to other markets? Because the vast majority goes stateside.
And that's a strategic position for Canada. Again, transitioning away from a reliance on American markets is to sell to Asian or European markets. We want to see less reliance on oil from our geopolitical adversaries, right. Russia, primarily. Yeah. And it is Canada does have tremendous fossil fuel resources. At the same time, we also need to skate where the puck's going, and the entire world is transitioning to an electric economy. So, those critical minerals that we have as a nation are critical to those electric devices. They need the things that we dig out of the ground and can refine. So our focus as well is developing the east-west transmission grid to make sure that all communities have access to electricity, reinvesting in nuclear, and the Prime Minister has said, we're committed to our our Paris climate goals, which is net carbon zero by mid-century, by 2050. So that work is proceeding as well. And I think in the spring, we're going to have our climate change plan come forward. And also in the spring budget, I think you're going to see a lot more investment in clean energy production, electricity, and, skating to where the puck's going.
Alberta could have a separation question, a referendum next year, if enough people sign a petition to kind of trigger that. Is that a big talking point in caucus right now?
It's a real serious concern.
Yeah.
Not necessarily separation, but just
a new reality.
Yeah, just the frustration with the federal government, whether it's in Alberta or if it's the separatist movements in Quebec. Those are things that our adversaries around the world are looking at to see Canada as weak.
Yeah.
So the more divided that we are, the more prone that we are for our adversaries to take advantage of. So, it is a talking point in the sense of, I don't know what Albertans are thinking in terms of separation, but I do know that we need a unified front across Canada in every province. And Alberta is a really important part of Canada. It always has been. And that Canadian unity is a really important part of why the world sees Canada as a stable investment opportunity, and we need to keep that.
Yeah, this I don't know what the word is, but this displeasure with Ottawa dates back decades. It's nothing new. And whether you're pointing to Quebec or Alberta or other provinces, some people always seem to have something up with the decision makers in the nation's capital. So it shouldn't surprise me if Alberta goes down the route of asking the question. We'll see where it goes. In regards to nation building, another big key was removing these cross-border trade barriers. Is that moving the needle, or is that going to take some time as well?
Well, we've removed the federal cross-border trade barriers, but a lot of them are provincial jurisdiction. And these are long-standing kind of protectionist measures that provinces have put in place over, the past century, really. For example, I'm a licensed professional engineer. I'm licensed in the province of Ontario. I cannot practice in other provinces unless I get licensed in. And it's the same for doctors and nurses and other professionals, tradespeople, and there's, for goods. So, for example, the classic example is you can't get BC wine or, in Ontario and vice versa. So there's some of those longstanding protectionist, policies that have been in place for a long time. But I think we are seeing some motion on the provinces. Premier Ford has been a real leader on this. Give him credit for that, of removing some of those barriers. It'll take time, but I think it's as a nation, we need to be one nation, not 10 different separate economies and 3 territories all working separately. We need to work together.
You mentioned geopolitical factors earlier on in our discussion, whether it's Ukraine or what's happening in Gaza or in many other places around the world, whether it's Russia, China, battling for the Arctic, U.S. potentially wants Greenland. There's a lot going on. How do you balance that as a Liberal Party, as a government, to say, we got to remain focused, keep our nation safe. These other factors, in many respects, we can control. How do we keep our country safe?
Well, Canada has always been a leader on the world stage. And I think our role, whether it's at the United Nations or whether it's in NATO or the European Union, keeping those relationships with, those alliances that we have with true partners. And those alliances are shifting. I mean, there's no question about that. But on the global stage, Canada is still a leader. So balancing that with our domestic challenges, the best thing that we can do as a nation is to make sure that, we are working closely with our true allies and that we're divesting from reliance on people who, were previously allies and maybe not so much right now. And like I said earlier, the entire world is going through the same exercise. And, though unfortunately, some of the more adversarial places in the world, people that have long been our adversaries or new, whatever, they do see an advantage in this readjustment of those alliances, and we have to be very cognizant of that. And working with the people who our goals are all allied with.
In terms of expectations versus reality, going into this job as a rookie MP, what were you thinking the job was going to be like, and what was it really like? And were those two the same?
It was fairly close. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I came from the city of Hamilton, a very large municipality. So the public-facing role is very similar, but the scale of the decisions that, when we vote on something, talking billions, not millions, that's quite a bit different. But also just, I feel very fortunate to be in a position where I feel like I am contributing at a pivotal time for Canada. And it's beyond just, a retail budget of like, oh, what's in the budget? Oh, it's got this tax cut or this benefit for the, like we're really setting the trajectory for the nation for the next century. And to be a part of that and have that responsibility, again, is something that I take really seriously. And unfortunately, I don't see that reciprocated from the other side of the floor a lot of the time, and that makes it that much more critical to be a part of those discussions.
Is that the biggest difference from a municipal council? Is the divisiveness or the partisanship that is played on the floor?
Honestly, the biggest difference is a municipal council, you couldn't simply lie during debate.
Okay. Now you can't.
So
gosh darn it.
I'm not allowed to say that you're lying,
okay,
but you're allowed to lie with impunity as long as you're in the House of Commons.
Right.
I find that really off-putting and difficult to deal with when the members opposite stand up and just say the most bold-faced lies and accusations, conspiracy theory nonsense, saying that as if it's true, getting that clip, rebroadcasting that, and then having these legions of propagandists, reshare that kind of thing. I find that really difficult. Because it's a political strategy, right? And I'm always confused. Like, do they actually believe what they're saying, or they're just saying it to get a reaction on their next social media post? That is a huge difference between the municipal level, where I would get sued if I said some of the things that are routinely said in the House of Commons.
Is that the worst part of the job?
It's definitely the most frustrating.
Right.
I'm not sure what the worst part of the job is. I'm still like, I'll give you an example. I was sitting in the lobby, sitting on my computer, answering email.
Okay.
Maybe email's the worst part of the job, actually. It never stops.
Yeah.
But answering email, and I was like, I could just sit in the House of Commons and do this.
Right.
So, go in, sit at my desk, answer email, but I have a seat in the House of Commons, and that is amazing.
It's pretty cool. What is the coolest part of the job?
Well, just that responsibility that you have. And also not knowing how long I'm going to be there. The reality is that we are, for the moment, still in a minority government. It could be 2 months, it could be 6 months, could be a year. Like, I don't know how much longer, I will have the opportunity to serve in this seat.
Right.
So, every single day that I'm there, I try to bring that sense of urgency. Like, okay, what am I going to do today? Because I might not have this position tomorrow. So I think for me, some of that sense of urgency to the job is I coming from the private sector, in that day-to-day work life where you had to deliver, on time and on budget. Like, it kind of reminds me of that. So I kind of enjoy that challenge of, okay, what am I going to do for my constituents today?
Yeah. At last check, you're one seat shy of a majority.
Yes.
Because a couple of the opposition members crossed the floor to the Liberal Party. What was that like? How did you find out, and what did it do to, I guess, the morale of the Liberals?
Oh, it was actually quite amazing. And I'm not surprised that people that were elected in good faith, that just have slightly more conservative values than we do, that went to Ottawa to work for the constituents, to benefit Canada, have found themselves in what's Chris d'Entremont described as a frat house atmosphere, and you really do see that in the House of Commons. I'd say, unfortunately, there's maybe a third of the, and you heard it here first. Pierre Poilievre will get 67% in his leadership review, because there's about a third of that party that is all in freedom convoy, anti-vax, conspiracy theory, burn it all down, and they absolutely love Pierre Poilievre as a leader, as an arsonist in chief, basically. There's another third of that party that I see that is so ingrained in their own propaganda that they have a difficulty seeing outside of the bubble, being objective by some of the positions that they take and the statements that they make. And then, the final third who, like I said, are there to really serve the community, do a good job. and they find themselves in this atmosphere. And then they're looking across the floor. When you're in government, you actually have an opportunity to deliver on your mandate. You know, when there's something that comes forward for Hamilton, I have access to the ministers and the prime minister and the PMO and the people that are making those decisions. And you're in opposition, you don't have that. So I can see why some conservatives would want to be part. You know, it's always funner to be on the winning team, right?
Right. Is there an expectation or an anticipation or a wish that one more member will come over?
Well, I don't think it's going to change how we govern, you know, what our positions are as the government, our priorities, our mandate. That's not going to change. We still, you know, hope that we command the confidence of the House. Where it would make an enormous difference is at the committee level, where the Conservative Party is not the opposition, they're obstruction. And at the committee level, it doesn't matter what it is, every single committee that I have to go into, it's like, what is the game today? What is the obstruction? What is the tactics that are going to be used to delay and postpone the government achieving their agenda? And it's hugely frustrating on a day-to-day basis because, you know, you're constantly, okay, what is the trick here? What are they trying to do? You know, how are they trying to obstruct this? Just simply to stop the government from being able to move forward with its agenda. So that's where a majority would make an enormous difference. And also talking about the importance of our national unity and having, you know, consensus across the country, that would make a huge difference in how we're able to move forward with these really critical policy, you know, pieces for Canada. This legislation that needs to move forward in order to protect our economic sovereignty, our way of life, and having one more member would drastically simplify that.
Back to the committee level situation, for lack of a better term, that's got to be so frustrating because, you know, that's taxpayers' dollars at work not working at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah, filibuster. It's like against my religion. Yeah. Like you basically just talk for the sense of delaying a vote on something. Like it's awful. It is such a waste of time and effort and money for no reason other than to frustrate the government from being able to achieve its policy objectives. And that's a big difference between the federal level and council, because at least at council, at the end of the day, you know, as tedious as a council meeting might have been, there's a vote and you make a decision and you move on. And it's not like that at the federal level, especially at committees. It's nonstop, just partisan bickering and obstruction. And I find that really frustrating. But also I find it embarrassing for the members opposite who are forced to be in that position in the first place. Right.
Just back to the two defections, because the curiosity's eating at me. How did you find out? Did someone tell you, or is this like an email that's sent out saying, "Hey, we got one additional member"? Is it like, you know, someone's crossing over? Like, what's the talk like?
Oh, it's just like high school, right? Like you're, well, I guess high school with a phone now, which didn't exist when I was in high school. Right, but you know, you get a text from somebody. Oh, did you hear the news? Like, no, is it real? Is this really happening? But you know, Chris, I don't know either of them very well. I mean, you know, just seeing them on the other side of the floor, but you know, talking to them in caucus, you know, in you know, behind the scenes a little bit. They're fantastic people. We're very happy to have them. And yeah, it does feel good that, you know, members opposite are seeing the government, seeing the policies that we're putting forward, seeing how we are doing things as a government, as a party, and saying, yeah, you know, I'd actually want to be part of that. I want to contribute to my community in the governing party in a way that I can't in opposition. So, you know, we're thrilled to have them.
How'd you celebrate in caucus the first time they came in? Like a big cheer or the group hug? How'd that go down?
It was a very big cheer, and then we closed the doors and got down to work.
Okay. Biggest threat in 2026 outside of the U.S.?
I'd say overall, you know, is the uncertainty globally. And there's so many geopolitical flashpoints in the world, and all of those incidents cause uncertainty. So when we're talking about affordability and the cost of housing and our economic position in Canada as being the top issue for Canadians, that all goes through like housing and homelessness, addictions and opioids, healthcare, all of those things. They all rely on Canada having a stable economic base in order to provide the programs that residents rely on. Mm-hmm. And every time there is one of these geopolitical flashpoints around the world, it causes uncertainty, and it causes us to have to deal with that in a day-to-day and take our eye away from our domestic needs. So I see those challenges growing. But I also see more and stronger alliances forming between like-minded organizations, the European Union and Canada, for example. Mm-hmm. When you hear rhetoric about Greenland or Venezuela, we now have a direct combined interests with Denmark. Talking about annexation of territory. Canada's providing more aid to Ukraine, a war that's been going on, I think it's 3 years now, or might even be longer, just coming up on the 3-year anniversary. This terrible war in Ukraine, but that's a bulwark against, this expansionism, authoritarian regime in Russia that, has to be stopped there. So hopefully we'll see some resolution to some of those conflicts. Canada is working hard to be a part of those solutions, but just the ongoing uncertainty in the world, I think, is the biggest challenge moving forward. Still
with 2026 and beyond, your plans or your goals for the Hamilton region, what do you want to see happen?
Well, like I said, Hamilton has just amazing resources to be a leader in Canada. Life sciences is Hamilton's biggest employer. It has been for some time. Having world-class facilities in Hamilton that can benefit from a little bit of federal investment to leveraged for private investment here. There's so many opportunities there, along with growth in green manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and technology. And I hate to say AI because I think it's heavy on the A, a little bit light on the I, but Hamilton is a global leader in some of those high technology manufacturing businesses. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here.
Are you optimistic that we're going to get a new trade deal with the U.S. next year?
It's going to happen when it happens. I don't want to hope that the American economy crashes or that they're, because, the Americans are our friends and allies. Like, we all know people on the other side of the border. I don't want to see them suffer. But at some point, there will be an economic reckoning for the positions of the United States. Mm-hmm. And I think at that point, we will see a realignment of a trade deal. But the Prime Minister has been clear. We're not going to take a bad deal. We're going to set our own path as Canada. We're going to realign our economy to not be reliant on the United States. And when we get a trade deal, that's great. But I think, businesses and individuals in Canada have to make that mental shift that no matter what, things are not going to go back to how they were. We can no longer have an economy that relies so heavily on a single trading partner that just because a president is elected that is hostile to decades of past trade deals, mm-hmm. that is breaking international law on a regular basis and setting his own rules. Like we have to make that mental shift that we need to set our own course as Canada.
Last one for you. When you're returning to the House of Commons, do you have a specific itemized list for you to bend the Prime Minister's ear to say, hey, Hamilton and the region needs this, or what is the goal for you in 2026?
Yeah, I mean, immediately we have some investments for housing, for healthcare infrastructure in Hamilton, along with our partners at the province. And also on, for me, one of the big issues is crime and public safety. And we have a number of bills that are already in the House, the Combating Hate Act, strengthening bail and sentencing. strengthening our borders, hiring more RCMP. So some of those day-to-day public safety, security things that are a priority for me that, I want to make sure that we get through committee and get passed as quickly as possible.
Well, I'm sure it's been an interesting first several months in the House of Commons. Continued success, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. It's amazing to have this nice long-form conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yes, you're always welcome.
Excellent.
That's John Paul Danko, and that's it for Newsmakers. Thanks for checking out the latest podcast. A big thank you as well to the all-star cast behind the scenes. If you like today's episode, click the thumbs up, hit subscribe, leave a comment as well. You can catch the Newsmakers podcast on chch.com/podcast and wherever you get your favorite podcasts.